Just to kind of like get things started here, I do want to say that this will be my first stream on Midjourney, so I'm super excited to be here. But also, if there's any hiccups and stuff, please don't. Uh, just let me know if there's any like audio levels or anything like that. We will be going through like one or two videos as well, because the the end product with this can be anything from comics to full animation. That range is massive, and I'll try to go over stuff pretty as concise as I can with this. But essentially, what we'll be doing is we'll be making original characters that are continuous or at least semi-continuous through your prompts, and the way that that's done is with a character sheet, and I'll just show one of these here. So this is the end product of the first stage of what we need in order to make content. We need a character turnaround, and these turnarounds are essentially the reference material for your prompts, so that you can say, "Hey, generate me something that is has the direction that I want, but maybe the character style or anything isn't right off your first go around." You can remix, inject them back in, so these references become pretty much the artist bible for your content that you're going to be making. So establishing consistent characters and all that. I do want to show, what this kind of looks like traditionally, because with my film and animation background, I got to experience a lot of different ways to make content, ways to make television, particularly. And in animation studios, you oftentimes have something called a animation bible. It usually is like the core do's and don'ts of making anything that is meant to be like an established world. Doing some proper world building. And the example that I have here, actually, before we hop into generative stuff, here's an example from King of the Hill. This is the do's and don'ts from King of the Hill, particularly that it's little notes, things that you probably wouldn't even consider are what is basically what you don't see as opposed to what you do. And so, like things like Hank can never look stronger than Red Corn, or that Boomhauer can never properly smile. The heads have to always be looking at the characters. These are little teeny like informational nuggets that will translate from your character sheets. We have no high fives. Like little rules like that are important. Not necessarily, give me all the options that are possible, but instead try to restrict the results to my character sheets or my references. So you'll see this a lot in traditional animation, where it's more like a massive list of what not to do as opposed to what to do. What you can make with the turnarounds is something like this. So this is the same character from the turnaround, and essentially you'll see that she is continuous through the panels. When you have these turnarounds, which I'll just pull this back up here real quick, these are the turnarounds that we generated through the remix workflow that we'll be going through today. The end product of it are these comics, and you can see that they're continuous framed, panel to panel. And this is a graphic novel that I made to demo this workflow. And just to kind of show my excitement here a little bit, this was all made with V4 Midjourney. We're at V 5 point what 2 or 3 at this point. Like it's exciting to see what the new tools can do with this combined. But we're I mean, the results from this were just jaw dropping to me. To be able to see this level of continuity between my prompts. And so we'll be getting into that here today. I really do want to see the kind of stuff you all want to make. I want this to be more than just me yammering on for however long. So what I did is there's in the pin post that should be pinned. There's something called the black box, and I know that for the folks that work in like in AI and whatnot, they don't like the term black box, but I'm just having fun with it. All right. So, but if you submit to the black box, the idea here is that anything you throw in there is going to be reference material that we can use to generate characters. There's a little bit of a Q&A, and that Q&A lets us know what kind of stuff that you'll want to make with that character. So It's a little silly in terms of how it's done, but I highly recommend that if you have like a couple characters from your prompts that you've generated before, that you go ahead and submit that. Now I'll bring this panel back in every once in a while as we get started. When it comes to the tutorial here, I I put a lot of time into this, into making a thorough back-to-back, like complete workflow or guide for how to turn, regular mid-journey prompts into like fully animated sequences and stuff. This is a very big tutorial. It's like 110 pages or so that I'd spent way too much time on to put together. But essentially, this little animated sequence you see right here is entirely from generated prompts. The only thing I did in order to make this work was constantly remix my turnarounds back into the prompts and then keep one of the backgrounds static that I animated by hand or manually. So basically, the camera is done through traditional like digital means, but otherwise, all of the prompts, poses, everything like that was all done with Midjourney. There's a little disclaimer. It's in here that's basically saying that um, this is a very powerful tool because it basically lets you copy and paste characters across multiple panels, which I hope and expect you to respect other people's like creative properties and stuff like that when doing this. It's just something that I work in entertainment. You know what I mean? I'm kind of on the both sides of this stuff, and I just really want to see what stories you guys make and what original characters you make. I just really would rather avoid doing a bunch of corporate stuff, corporate mascots and stuff. So if you have especially original characters, those are the ones that I'm going to focus on today. Before we just start like prompting into this stuff and start creating turnarounds and whatnot, I do kind of want to go into first the very first setup thing that you're going to need to do in order to have continuity is you're going to have to turn on remix mode here. So what you do is you just type /settings, and inside of that you're going to find this window here, and this window has a button down here called remix mode. Make sure that is turned on because that's going to let us be able to edit the prompts in between, basically as we start making changes and stuff. So as long as you have that mode on, you're good to start generating stuff. But we'll also need an image manipulator of some sort. Today, I will be using Photoshop, but you do not need Photoshop. You can do this with MS Paint. It's really just a matter of being able to select the pixels in a box and say, I want this pose. I want this pose. That so on and so forth. If you have a program that can do that, you can follow along. Let's generate our first kind of a random turnaround here just to show you guys what that process looks like, and then go through some of the community characters that we've made as well. Let's go ahead and gen a character turnaround here. So I'm going to do imagine, and then full body turnaround. I usually include a gender at this point just to kind of give us a little more direction. I'm going to go with him, and let's just do a redhead just to kind of change it up a little bit. I tend to oftentimes default to brunettes and blondes and stuff, but um, we'll do one without Niji first, and then we'll do one with Niji as well. And the reason why I tend to do like this, like you know, two-hand approach on this is because Niji is great for having a limited data set. It means it's much easier to kind of get the drawn aesthetic that we might be looking for. But while that's generating, let me show you why you do not have to use Niji. I've prepared a couple of different turnarounds from other people who have used my workflow. They've joined my Discord and went like, okay, I either they got stuck somewhere and they needed some help, or they otherwise were like, okay, I need to share this. This is too cool. So the first one here is actually from me. This shows you like kind of the different posing and characteristics similar to the King of the Hill Bible that I was showing earlier. Um, with Micah, I wanted her to be kind of clumsy. I wanted her to be, this kind of spastic, teen, and just, a late to school, just kind of falling over her own feet kind of stuff. And I felt like all these poses kind of captured that personality. When it came to this one, which is one that I do with my Twitch stream, I wanted it to be much more angelic and more, like an adventurer with maybe a light magic ability or something like that. This is a fantasy story that, with these poses here, I can essentially establish that the character is light-footed or otherwise, um, it behaves differently than how Micah would behave. So it's pretty cool to see these side by side because oh wow, okay, who kidded me? Somebody followed me on Twitch while we're streaming. Let me turn that off real quick here. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for following me on a different platform than what we're streaming on right now. But I need to make sure that that is not blasting in the middle of my stream here. I'm just going to delete that. And oh no, it's happening again. Uh, let's hope that if I delete it, that everything stops with that. That'll be fine. Okay, all right. So again, thank you so much for following. I do appreciate that. So when it comes to the other turnarounds though from the community members, this one is the first one I want to show here, and this is why we don't have to restrict ourselves to Niji. Alley Cat here made a space cadet female here, and they did the entire workflow from beginning to end. They started off with a character that they found that they really liked that they generated, and then they ran through the turnaround prompts, which we'll get into next. And then they did the action posing as well. And you can see that although they followed my tutorial almost one to one, like this is my tutorial focuses on running and jumping as the action poses. And they did the same thing here. But because of the visual information that's baked into this character, right, that it can kind of pull from it, it's a sense of confidence that Micah does not have. Look at how she's running in comparison to how Micah was running over here. Those two should give you an idea of the amount of language that this visual language that we can't really understand without either a lot of experience in film and entertainment or you're an AI and you have super intelligence like like it's awesome to see this in action. This one is from Throckwaddle, and what they did was they had the same thing where they had a turnaround, they had a prompt that came together here. They actually did a little oh no, it's happening again. That's right. I have to turn off every kitty. What I wanted to show here, though, is they animated their turnaround. What you can see here is the turnaround that they had just basically lined up as a GIF animation, and they did this by reading the latter half of my tutorial, which explains how to make animated GIFs, or what is called cinemagraphs. And the only thing they did was select the first couple of turnarounds from them and then isolated each image. But you notice that they're different. It's because that's the final version that they were happy with. They cleaned everything up, they made everything as they wanted it to be, and they were ready to start injecting these references into their future prompts. So very cool to see that done. For other turnarounds that we've done more like dynamic poses and stuff like that, where it's more like dancing and more fluid movement. But the thing about this, and I'll note this here, the reason why this turnaround is it's this is great. This is very usable, especially these kind of like body shots here and whatnot. They're quite useful to have because it lets you be able to get like close-ups and what is called a cowboy shot or a shot from the hip up. But things like this are useful, but only useful if we isolate every one of these poses. So they need to look like this, where every one of them is easily selectable as its own thing without like accidentally like snipping a bunch of other parts of the character reference here. So I haven't done that work on this one here where I've separated all these out. This is just kind of brought up for example here. But outside of using Niji, which is quite reliable as a data set, we have non-Niji prompts as well that work with the turnaround prompt. It's very important that if you really do want to have like a dynamic character set, that you have the back of the character as well as a what is called a 2/3 of the character, because oftentimes you'll get duplicates, like you'll get multiple face fronts, you'll get multiple profiles or whatever it ends up being. uh, the idea here is that you really do want to just limit to what's absolutely essential. If you have a bunch of redundant references, it's going to be problematic. it'll essentially make some really wonky stuff go on. So the for the last thing I have here is actually the showing non-humanoid also works. You can definitely do everything from monsters to robots with this. Where it tends to fall apart is fantasy animals, and I think that this is something that some dragons might work. But when you start to get into like theoretical creatures or just like things that really shouldn't exist or otherwise don't have any real form or structure to them, ethereal creatures too, it tends to fall apart. But things like magma golems or any sort of fantasy like personification of a real thing, those work just fine. So, you know, um, if you want to have a rock golem like a never-ending story, you can easily do that. It's pretty cool to see this work outside of just humanoid, especially anime humanoid form. Just to give us an idea of something that we have here, actually, I'll focus on this one here, so I can then just pop that open here. So we have a couple examples here of our first runs. So you'll see that it starts to replicate certain things that we would see in professional like concept studios and stuff, particularly having a color chart, which is usually not accurate, and otherwise just kind of showing slightly different poses of these characters here. I think personally the bottom right is the best example, and the reason being is that we have clear indication of the legs silhouetted all through here. A lot of times I like to summarize it as this is like silhouette plus. It's going to look at a lot more than just the general outline of the character, but it is effectively the same sort of reference when we talk about re-injecting it back in. It's going to try to bring the image back to look like your turnarounds after we get into this. And then so this is Niji without any styles or anything turned on. And then we have non-Niji as well. And you can see that I didn't indicate anything about art style. I didn't indicate anything about the uh, the actual like artistic intent. I just described the character. And this lets us kind of explore and look around for the characters that we want to use. But let's just say that maybe from another, prompt that we had made that we want to actually capture that character and then make a turnaround of that. So say like there's like a prompt that you really really liked and you just want to have that character back in or make a turnaround of that character. I see this a lot with traditional artists that want to get into this stuff. They will draw something, and then I'll make a turnaround for them. So what we can do is prompt just a generic, but this time not say anything about turnaround. I'm really honestly just trying to get us a pretty generic human prompt, probably that's not full body, probably that is just like a pretty close up shot. Without using style raw, the issue with that is it tends to over stylize or otherwise and make it complex from the results. It'll try to quote unquote finish the image to look pretty or otherwise done. And I actually use style raw a lot when I'm making comics because it gives me something more of what I'm looking for, which is assets, not finished images. This is an example of like, you know, where although the live action elements like or not live action but the painterly aspects of this are seen, if we were to like try to copy this style and bring it into another prompt and stuff, that character is going to be represented in this art style. It's going to be where we reference from our character sheets here. When it comes to just basically generating like off of like a prompt that you liked, you really do want to isolate to just the character. So you might want to use a photo image manipulator or something like that to be able to, um, what is it, to essentially isolate just the character as much as possible. But we'll go ahead and wait for this first one to run, which was not under turbo. But um, the while this is going, I'm going to go ahead and upres this one as well. I will be taking a look at the black box here. Now I'll bring that back up here real quick. It's in the pin posts. If you submit to the Google form that is linked in the pin post, you can see your character get used in the stream. So we might manipulate them. We might put them into a scenario. We might do some pretty cool like new pan overs and stuff we can do with with the most recent version of Midjourney, but this is how I'm gonna accept new characters for future streams as well. So all right, let's hop back into the gen view here, okay? And we're gonna just take a look at this this just generic close-up character. Say you I'll turn myself off here. Say you just really identify with the bottom right character, just as an example. That character we have new tools that let us be able to expand out and otherwise make the character more fleshed out. But what we can do is go ahead and grab the URL for this image. That is just by middle clicking it and grabbing it from your browser, or right clicking and hit image or copy image link. And what we're going to do is do /imagine. We're going to not do a blend. And this is really where most people screw up on this workflow. Our intent is actually not to use this image as a blend, which if I just paste this into here and then type full body turnaround, it may look like this character, but it's most likely not. Instead, what works is to say, hey, I like this character matches pretty close, but I really like how this character looks, right? So what we're gonna do, because we have remix mode turned on, I can hit variation subtle, paste the image into there, and hit submit. And then we can do the same thing on variation strong, paste the image, and then submit. And the idea here is that we are adding the image as another reference point. And image weights are very heavy with Midjourney. It's actually I do wish image weights were on Niji for this reason, but you can see that if we just do a blend, it's all over the place in terms of the character posing, the composition. These are not the four of the same characters. It's different every time. It may have similar hair, but it's not the same character. But now, if we look at the remix blend that I did here, this is suddenly a lot more like this character. I'll zoom in here so you can take a look. Whoa, turbo mode's awesome. Okay, I love this. I just gotta mention that real quick. I'm not used to this being fast like this. But I'll turn myself off here. Take a look at this. So from the first ones, I can tell based on this image here, which we'll keep up as a reference here. I would say that the the third one here, the bottom left, is the most like this character just right off the bat, because I'm seeing a timidness, I'm seeing a shyness, the with the blush face and stuff. It's a little more captured on the first one, but we kind of just get a better result overall, I think, on the third one. And it's very common for characters to have like their hands in their pockets and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see what that looks like here in a minute. But that was variation subtle. You notice that it kept most of the poses from the original prompt that we had. And the reason why that was because of variation subtle. Before version 5.2, everything was variation subtle in terms of how it worked. Variation strong kind of changed the game for me, and I'll explain that here in a bit. But you can see with subtle, we had very good, consistency between all the results. But with variation strong, however, we started getting alternate poses of the same character. That is just minor sort of shift of the shoulders, shift of that kind of stuff. But it gives us at least a little more of a alteration of like mood, emotion, that kind of thing. And so while that is coming up here, I'll go ahead and bring that up here. So you could look how it replicated some of the redness in the face. Is pretty cute to see. But now we can also pull up this one here, and you can see what it actually did. And we might need to re-render this one because this is a little odd looking. If we zoom in all the way, look what it did. It had this like photo scan effect that it did on here. And I see these little errors and stuff from trying to replicate hand drawn like character sheets and stuff. And we can use like negative weights to try to remove that stuff, but overall, we want to make sure we upres something that doesn't have any of these kind of artifacts in it, because if it does, you're going to see it on every future thing we do. So I'll come back into here and I'll hit variation subtle without changing anything except just hitting the button because we already have baked the image in there. Um, I don't know at what point the like in terms of like anchors and such like that, visual anchors, but I feel like this is a bit of a preview of what that's going to look like, where you're able to like you know control the characters that are inside of your prompts and stuff. uh, because we can also give them direction by using this remix injection. So if I go ahead and say on variation, I believe variation subtle should do enough for this one here. If I say, all right, this character, I actually want him to be real angry and upset and um, and sad, and just try to change the mood entirely from this. Um, there's a good chance that with variation subtle, it won't it might do it, it might not, but variation strong is basically guaranteed to do it in terms of forcibly directing or redirecting your character. Um, so let's see here. Yeah, we definitely got some results that we're looking for here. So let's go ahead and take a look. Yeah, there we go. So on the bottom left here is that character upset or sad or frowning. Right. It just that's it's awesome to see. Just being able to direct characters this way with remix mode. It's very important that we start off with a word only prompt in order to then inject our reference image into that prompt. The image weights are extremely heavy, especially with default, without messing with image weights and stuff or image weight codes. They are very heavy. So this way, at least, we're able to say, okay, now we know how to direct the character. Now we know how to make a turnaround of that character. We can now start to pose the character or provide keyframes for whatever we end up making. And this is really where you want to like take a second to like sit back and think, hmm, what what story do I actually want to tell? What is my goal, my intent, my purpose of making or generating stuff? Because I feel like a lot of folks that do this stuff are really just doing it for fun and just like making memes and stuff like that. And I'm all for it. Like that's great. Some of the best stuff I've seen that come out of here were just real dumb memes. um, but the in terms of the to have like intent and purpose behind it, you really do want to have a story at least in mind of what you want to accomplish. So for the tutorial, I had a very simple goal. I was just going to have a girl late for school. That was the entire premise that I had come up with. We first started with a slacker teen. That was the prompt that I slacker teen blonde her, or sorry, blonde anime Niji. At the time I was writing anime and Niji a lot just to kind of force or really force that aesthetic, but that's not necessary anymore. You can just write slacker teen blonde if you want to follow this one to one. But after we had our reference here, like things that matched the action of what we wanted, we knew that we were able to do what we wanted to do in terms of the words we were using. So we would create a turnaround for this character, and this I won't go through this word for word. The links either on that QR code here on the corner, or it's otherwise something that we'll make available to you. But by the time the turnarounds, like by the time we have a consistent character sheet, like as I go through this process, starting off with a word only prompt, we want to turn around. I inject Micah back into it, which is the blonde girl, and we ended up with that final character sheet, the one that's here, this one here. So the next important step is the posing, which you have to have an idea in mind of what you want to do. So for this one, like I said, she was going to be late for school. So I knew I wanted her to be moving around. I wanted her to be running. I wanted her to be, you know, a little bit like sweating bullets at like being late for school, right? So the prompts I used for this were action poses, running, jumping, her, green jacket, red backpack. And the only reason I added the attire at the end there was to change the silhouette, to effectively force those details. If you're way too detailed on apparel, particularly, you're going to start to notice that a lot of the prompts are like fashion magazines. Like they start to look like you're trying to be sold a product, you know? So I really recommend not focusing too much on apparel, but instead focus on mood and aesthetic a lot. that's how I prefer to approach this stuff. Is you'll notice that a lot of times the color dominates the prompts. Like the redhead is always wearing a red hoodie. Um, we can change that stuff later in Photoshop or any other image manipulator that lets us like selectively edit areas of the image. But for now, I think it's just that's that you'll see that also a lot with webcomics where characters their hair color matches the shirt they wear or whatever. Um, in order to make a memorable character. But for the sake of today, I am kind of curious. And we'll open the black box here in a minute to see what's in there. Yeah, and I'm sorry I haven't been paying attention to chat, guys. Like I normally I have everything up on like a Twitch stream and stuff where I can see it all at once. But it since we're doing so many things today, it's gonna be pretty spread out here. But hey, how's it going? What I want to hear from you all is what do you want to see this character doing? I'm curious what sort of thing this character could be doing. It could be waiting in line for coffee. It could be getting. Why is everything breakfast food for me right now in my head? I like getting a bagel. Whatever. Let's see. Playing D&D, skateboarding on cheese. Juggling. I'm joking. It's a nightmare. I imagine juggling is anything with a lot of balls in it makes way too many balls. I've noticed. Okay, jumping up and down, dancing with a flagpole. Time for a snack. Victor is hungry. I had a granola bar. Okay, Kinky, I'm fine. But let's see here. Okay, cool. Let's do eating pizza. I think that's actually kind of just a simple prompt to do, and eating is always kind of a cursed result. I'm gonna warn you all now that we're gonna see what happens. But at least if we're using Niji, we should have a decent result with that. What I'm gonna encourage you guys to do as well is in VC Create, which is in the main Midjourney Discord, you can start to remix off of each other's prompts too. What we're gonna do is we're gonna say, uh, again, without referencing any sort of image prompts or anything like that, we're just going to describe this character. So redhead, him, and in the front of the prompt is the most like dominative part or like just the heaviest part of the prompt. And I don't know how much this has changed in the most recent versions of Midjourney, but usually the order of the prompt is like most important to least important. Let's think about what's going to dominate the image here. It's not going to be the character. It's going to be the location. It's going to be the scene itself. If you think about the percentage of how much of an image is consumed by the character, it's not anywhere. Usually it's not even 50%. Like the character is just in the scene moving around or whatever. So we're going to start off with Pizza Palace. Let's just do that. Pizza Palace restaurant, eating pizza. That's the action. Now we have redhead and him. The reason I am again reinforcing the gender is that if we tried to image inject into like a female anatomy with this male character, it just doesn't really know what to do. Not that it's really knowing anything that we're doing. It just doesn't really give us reliable results. So I include an arbitrary gender. If you include genderless as the prompt, like as the starting prompt, you're far more likely to make like webtoons and webcomic kind of stuff where the characters are these generic sort of like sometimes bald stick figures, right? So, but because we're enforcing redhead, it could be, a redhead webtoons character or whatever, or webcomic character. But for this case, we're just going to go with this Niji5, and we're going to see what sort of environment this creates. If we do not get a good enough environment, we can just turn off Niji, and then suddenly we're not restricted to a 2D environment anymore. Okay, yes, we're getting some very usable results right off the bat here, y'all. So you'll notice here that yes, it's a very messy way to eat pizza, but they're certainly doing it. Let me pull it up here bigger. It's always a little bit of a crapshoot when it comes to doing this stuff live for y'all. So we'll see how well these come out. But it's pretty funny whenever you involve eating how it doesn't really understand how hands work, in terms of how the pizza is and all that kind of like look at the way that slice is floating on the top right. Like it it's it's a bit silly, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is the composition. It matters just are we happy with how big the characters in the frame, the action of the character, what they're doing. The top left one looks like a scene from JoJo, which is kind of funny. But I think for the sake of, trying to make this, look like this character here, we can go with the bottom left or the top right. I'm gonna go with the bottom left just to see what we get out of that. And now, what I'm going to do is we are going to create a quick character sheet that we will then inject into this image here. We can start off with just the close-up, and see what that does. But it doesn't really give us a ton of variation in this. We may lose a little bit of consistency. So inside of this, I have copied the link from the close-up that we have. I'm going to hit very subtle, paste that in there, do that again on very strong. I tend to do both just to mess around. And also, by the way, I spelled restaurant wrong. I recognize I spelled restaurant wrong. It didn't matter. It understood my intent. So one of the things that I love about getting into this stuff is that, you know sometimes the results you get are completely unpredictable, but we can at least start to see patterns of what works. But take a look at this. With variation subtle, it's mostly unusable. Let that load for a second here. Look at the chaos of this. And this is all because we only gave it a single image to reference. We only gave it like essentially that one picture. What it's trying to do is to manipulate the photo to look, to look like what we referenced earlier, that remix that we did. This really weird close up here kind of is a hint at what's happening here. Because if I scroll back up, look at how much the original image dominates the frame here of the square frame compared to how much it dominates the top left there. Compared to the original image that was used, it's trying to find a middle ground between those two prompts essentially. We don't want it to do that. We want it to reference as much as possible from our character sheet, because then the consistency's there. But if we did variation strong, however, and this is where the new tools come in, we get ridiculous continuity just with variation strong and including that one reference image. They all have the same pose, which is why the character sheet's so important, but they all are that character. Am I wrong here? Like, does this not look like the character that we started off with here? It's really cool to see that level of continuity off of a single image. And yes, the context has completely changed of the, like like where the character's poses are. Sometimes his hands in the frame, sometimes it's not. That doesn't really matter because we got all of our intent from the word only prompt. Restaurant. Yeah, I wish I could be patient with myself on pronunciation and wording. I'm also heavily dyslexic. I will mention. If you hear me stuttering and stuff, that's from that. But I'll go ahead now that we have some pretty consistent, characters from just from variation strong. We were able to make usable, content from that. Very cool to see. But we need to now make this a character sheet in order to really direct this character in the scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my image editor here, Photoshop, um, and we are going to grab our turnaround here. And your turnaround sheet isn't really representative of the final product. It's just a guide. It's just, again, a character bible for the rest of this here. So I have my full body turnaround here. I do appreciate y'all watching and tuning in and stuff. It's very cool to do this with y'all. But let's just bring all these in together, something like that. And then let's think about actions that make sense for I guess eating pizza and stuff like that. That would be like sitting at a chair. That would be like at a diner or something like that. So we probably need to prompt different poses of relaxing in a chair. I am going to simply word only prompt a bunch of actions. So we'll do multiple action poses. I'll put character sheet in the front of it too. Character sheet. Multiple action poses. Well, actually, I'm sorry. It shouldn't be action poses because we're making him sit in a chair. So multiple poses sitting, relaxing, and kicking back. Let's do that. Just kicking back. Knee G5, and then we want to say some minor character descriptions at the end here. Him, redhead. And by putting redhead at the end, I'm kind of anticipating that there'll be a lot less emphasis on his hair. We might still have a red hoodie, but we'll see what the results are from this. At least in my opinion, when we start to get these poses and stuff, the poses will be kind of all over the place, and this is really where you want to take your time and make sure that you have the poses that really express the mood of the character that you have. So just like the first results that we got in from this are very usable. I mean, there's some very funny poses in here. I like the top right a lot. Okay, let's go with top right. Bottom left, his foot crosses over. Yeah, you're gonna see all sorts of anatomical wonkiness, and depending on how cleaned up and good your final sheet is in this, is going to dictate whether or not that anatomy wonkiness shows up in your final product. And I'll get into why traditional artists really have everybody beat when it comes to what this tool can do now. So let me first just upres the top right here. We're now going to grab individual individual URLs from our Photoshop or from our image generator. Let me switch on over. Yeah, okay. This is like my complete view, showing you all three kind of programs here. We have our browser view on the bottom, we have our Photoshop at the top, and then we have our Discord here on the side. What I want to do is I want to come into Photoshop here, and I'm just going to marquee select the first pose. We just start pasting the results of our prompts here. So let's just go ahead and grab all of these. It's literally this easy. You just copy and paste into Discord. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us 4 URLs. Those URLs, they all need to be separate. They all need to be individual URLs. So now I can just send this over to Discord. Now, any public link will work, but it's just easier to post this all in one place. So because I'm focusing on a full body image here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with this image here as the very first URL, and then I am basically just going to open them in order of that, like that. And what this does is it gives me 4 URLs that I can use. So let me come into here, grab the first URL, and we're just going to paste that into Discord by itself, just so that I have all of the URLs as a single thing that I can copy and paste. And last one. So these 4 URLs are just the images that are above here, okay? So I'll copy that. I'll come on up here, and we will hit variation subtle, and then variation strong. Again, you don't have to do both, but I love doing both because it really gives me an idea of the range that we get from this. Those URLs are essentially what you're going to keep as a notepad document that you can then just keep remix injecting back in until you get what you want. So for the first one here, which is variation subtle, you can see that it kept all the poses for the most part, but it anatomically it starts to not make sense. So I'll pull this up to be bigger so you guys can see. Anatomically, they're kind of all over the place. Like sometimes he's where his hoodie sleeve is massive. Sometimes he has like 2 hands. There's like weird blurring or sketchiness in some of these, and other times we get some really great like facial poses, like just random little things that if we clean them up manually, they might be very usable. But that's not the goal today. The goal is not to clean up stuff manually. The goal is to try to make stuff that we can immediately incorporate into our character sheet. So that's where variation strong comes in now. We can take a look at this. Look at that. The character is now wearing the same pants, the same kind of hoodie and aesthetic, but is in a sitting or relaxed pose. I would say that we can combine multiple of these now to effectively create our character sheet. And you'll want to keep these profile poses that have the cutoffs at the bottom here, because this might be referenced as a close-up or a profile panel, like especially if you're prompting comic panels, being able to get all sorts of different angles and ranges of the reference images are really, really important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upres the first two, and we are going to compare them in our character sheet here. So I'll hop on over um, to Photoshop here, and we are just going to start copying and pasting these character sheets. Let's go ahead and here, copy that. All right, we got 1, 2. And you notice that we still have that like kind of shy guy, mood, but there's a little bit of change. There's a little bit of alteration that has happened, and that's mostly because like, the close-ups and such are going to start adding lots of details, lots of little featherings and things like that. We have to not look at those details too closely. It's mostly just trying to establish a continuous person as opposed to a continuous art style in that way. What we can do now is start to look at the differences between the results that are here. Particularly the fact that there's like a line in the pants here. There's some issues with the shoe colors being different here. And especially on our original image reference here, these shoes are real like duck feet. You know what I mean? Like there's some silly stuff happening here. We can manually clean all that up, but for the sake of like having you guys not watch me like fiddle around with Photoshop and whatnot, and also I want to keep the focus on Midjourney today. The what we're going to do instead is we're just going to isolate these images and use them as our references for today. So I'll go ahead and delete any unnecessary parts we don't need. So let's go with getting rid of this little collect panel here, and just start to get us something that if I can easily come in here, highlight, we come back here to Discord, and we start to paste all of our profiles and things. We don't want to have redundancy, so we don't want to have the second one here. We just want that one that we have. And we are going to now take this pose as well. And you don't have to have box select. You can actually arbitrarily just select around and then paste that in, and it will forcibly make a box around the paste. So that's neat. You might also be wondering about the negative space, the fact that it's white in here. It is true that ideally we want to like remove the white space that's inside of here, but for the sake of just working efficiently, I don't think we really need to worry about that too much. A lot of times the white space is kind of seen as negative space. So now that we have these three poses, like these three, maybe more in line with what we think of somebody who's sitting down to eat for pizza, we can hit enter on here, submit those in, and very easily we're going to grab these three URLs as well. Whoop, 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 like that. And I will paste the URLs in here just so that I have them as URLs that I can select later. Now, I'm just going to hold on to that for a second. We are going to combine the URLs that we had earlier and put them in the front of that. This essentially makes a massive list of URLs that will be your reference material for establishing continuity on everything you do moving forward. At this point, once you have all these URLs, I would open up a notepad document and save those URLs, because that is essentially your character Bible now. Whatever your characters change, like position or environment or anything like that, you'll need to create new poses or new action sheets to represent that. In film and animation, it's called a keyframe, where you have a primary pose, and then essentially most animations move keyframe to keyframe to keyframe, and then animators will draw in betweens in between those frames to complete the movement that's there. Essentially, we're just establishing the keyframes here and letting Midjourney make all the in betweens. If we now go into we have all these URLs. We can now go all the way back to our pizza prompt here, right? And let's try to actually say, hey, let's do a variation strong, but include all of our references as well, and see what that does. But at the same time, I'm going to do /imagine, and we're just going to include all those image references as one, and we're going to do a blend as well. So a blend's going to make it look a lot more like the reference sheet, but we might be able to add some more diversity to our results too. So let's go ahead and say, uh, eating pizza at the Pizza Palace and just see what it does with need you turned on without any. Because here's the thing: the only reason I'm referencing pizza in this prompt is because that's the only thing that's now missing from the image references. We have him sitting, we have the character close up, we have the character in different angles, all that stuff. Every time you hit variation in Midjourney, it essentially looks at the image references again. So this is where, you know, I think in version 4, the reroll button we would use a ton because we're constantly rerolling the results. But now we more want to focus on variations. But take a look at that. We kind of have a story here. It's like, oh, there's spinach on my pizza. I don't like spinach. You know, like there's a little bit of a communication that's happening here. It could be something fun that we could explore. But you can start to see that we have the character. Their hoodie and their pants are the same. The hair color is the same. And I didn't reference anything except for eating pizza at the Pizza Palace, because I now have the character Bible good to go. It's next level breeding. This is, yeah, one use of remix that is interesting. I'll say this about remix mode. This is like the only way that I'm able to like really make functional use of Midjourney for myself, because a lot of times I am creating stuff that isn't just like a one-off image. I need to make a complete story, or I need to make multiple references from, different popular culture or different pop culture characters and stuff. I need there to be consistency in that, and I don't want to be fiddling with Photoshop for hours and hours and hours trying to get the things to look right. So, um, the at least for me, it's quite impressive to be able to like get 85 to even 90% there. Like that's crazy. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of dial back a little bit. This is going back in time a bit of all the things that we did to get to this character. But now I want to show you guys why we do word only prompts. Why it's so important, at least in my opinion, to do word only prompts. The word only prompt that I want to do for today is probably something that is going to happen. Like we could give it a location. We can do. There's a couple different ways we can like Mad Lib this together, but for now, I just want to show that like let's do opening the door to a pizzeria, beautiful sunny day in Italy. Why not? Why not? Let's just do Italy. Establishing shot. And this is in the tutorial. There's a big section on this, and I won't really get into it too much here today. But in the tutorial, there's a really big emphasis on filmmaking, my own filmmaking experiences actually. But establishing shot, and then let's do Need You 5 just to kind of keep us in an animated style. Again, we don't need to do Need You 5. In fact, it's probably going to make it look more like anime after we remix back into it. But and feel free to correct me. I don't know if there's a proper term that AI folks have made up for remix injection particularly, but that's what I call it. I've been calling it remix injection since, I don't know, since November. Where essentially we are trying to inject the character or inject the image information using remix mode, super impositions and stuff like that. So you can see here, although this is a very beautiful shot of what looks like the outside of a pizzeria in Italy, totally here, there's one thing that I purposely left out of the prompt, which is the gender. It is the person. There's no person for me to inject into here. If I were to take all of our reference Bible images here and then inject that into here, it's called what I call a blind injection, where there's no workable depth maps. There's no workable silhouette of a person that's inside of here. So to correct that, what we're going to do is we're just going to come into here and add a person to the prompt. So let's do beautiful day Sunday establishing shot with and without necessarily saying I want him opening the door. Like I don't want to emphasize the actual action of putting a hand on a door, because otherwise it's going to focus a lot on that. Instead, I'm going to say he enters. Let's just do that. Let's just say he enters, and then if it's not close enough, if the silhouette's not close enough to that, then we'll start to incorporate the hair and the apparel again. But essentially what we're doing is just trying to give us a little bit of um, a starting point for our remix injection. So we didn't get anybody in here. So I'm going to now emphasize. You can see here we didn't get nothing. It's still just an empty storefront. So let me go ahead and put this in the front. He enters the business. Let's just do the pizzeria. I can't spell. I can't spell. Opening the front door, and then I'll remove pizzeria from the second half of this. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I want to bring him to the forefront. So we'll say redhead. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that and see if we need to if we need to keep emphasizing that we want a person here. The one thing I'm trying to avoid here is to have him dominate the image, because that's what that's what the character Bible is going to do. The character references is going to essentially try to conform in between the two, your references and your image here. Okay, yes, we got what we needed out of this one here. So you can see that there he's kind of coming into the door. Is sort of in front. The actual action here doesn't matter. It just matters that we have a silhouette of a person, because our remix injection is going to allow this person to now move through the space, and we can direct what this character can do. This might sound nuts, but we're going to be able to keep the environment mostly continuous through this process. So now what we'll do is we'll come back up to our URLs. Because we've been working, I can easily just copy and paste them from above, but I would recommend keeping that notepad open. So we'll take this first one here, and we're going to just upres that. And again, we'll do a variation subtle and a variation strong, but variation subtle is going to keep the environment. It's going to keep as much of the depth map or whatever intact. So we'll hit subtle first. And before I hit strong, we're just going to take a look at the results of this. All right, so let's take a look at this. So you can see that there's some anatomy wonkiness. There's some weirdness that is in terms of like trying to understand the space. But look at that. It kept the environment almost always consistent. But the character is now moving in the frame. If you saw from my tutorial at the top here, I'll move on up over here. If you notice that in this animation, this is essentially what I did. It's just at the time we didn't have the variation subtle button, but effectively it does the same thing. Where I had all these poses of her in front of this cathedral running around, and the only thing I did was isolate her, remove the background, and then keep a single background throughout the whole thing. So this is how you make cartoons with Midjourney, at least how I do it. So let's go ahead and swap back over to our full view here. In fact, I'll do the focused view here, because I do want to now show you what happens when we hit reroll here. I think that I don't really know before version 5. This used to work, but this doesn't really work as well as it used to, where the reroll button now completely does a blend instead of does the exact action that we did again. So in order to, and I'll just wait for the results here so I don't confuse you all. You're going to notice that we don't get the same results we did. We do not get the continuity of the background that we had before. Instead, we do have probably very usable shots of a blend where it's remixing blended images. But look at that. We already lost continuity of the hoodie. We already, there's some things that work. There's some things that we can manually fix, but that continuity is largely gone. Yeah, you can notice here that even like some of the posing is different, like to the point where I just don't even feel like it's the same shy character anymore. It's just kind of a cool kid in hoodie. Again, we're getting closer to fashion results. So to fix that reroll button not working that same way, we actually just double back up to the original prompt that we had, that was the word only prompt, and we hit variation subtle again. So we are going to hit the same button again, paste the same URLs again, and that will then let us repeat the results that we had from here, where the background's consistent, but the character moves around in the frame. And this works in reverse too, by the way. Like if you want to be able to say everything is continuous but the background, so the character is always changing, then all your references need to be of the back. It's basically you're just doing it with the subject is the environment as opposed to a character. But it always takes a little bit of extra time to, even in turbo mode, It takes a little extra time for it to do these kind of like remixing of a bunch of images. But while that's going on, I can actually show you all shorten here, and then we can actually select our entire prompt here and write that in there and see by clicking on show details, we can actually see the weight of the images right here, and see which ones have the most dominative elements of our character Bible. So this first one here is the main pose, which is what we want. We want the main pose to be the reference that it takes in, where even the fact that the hoodie is slightly off center and stuff just shows a level of like, like I rushed to get here, or I otherwise don't care about how, how straight my hoodie is or whatever. There's certain little characteristics that you can kind of pull from this, or at least infer from this. And this little like chart here kind of shows you what I mean by the gradient like element of these prompts, where each first thing that we post has less and less importance as we continue. So pretty cool to see. But the this remix, even in turbo mode, wow, it's taken a while. Let's go ahead and rerun that again, just because it might be bugged there for a second. I want to grab all my URLs, hit variation subtle, paste that into there, and then we'll see what the results are on that. But yeah, we'll let that render. This is incorrect. Seed is very useful when trying to determine what prompt is good and what not. It is amazing for comparison for other things, also like chaos and style. Okay, seed is not useless. Seed is very, very useful. But for my purposes, I don't use seed. And the reason why I don't is because the level of predictability is not the predictability that I'm really anticipating. Like when I put in like a seed into the prompts, and referring onto that, I'm getting a level of continuity that doesn't make sense for what I'm doing. It's adding changes and complexities to places that essentially change the character itself. It doesn't change it doesn't bring that character from point A to point B, but instead says, here are the alternate dimensions of that character. Like it's not the same thing. For the most part, whenever we're kind of like using codes, using commands, the reason why you don't see me using them is because one, it overcomplicates the process for the sake of a tutorial. And two, probably the bigger one, is the fact that the image codes can oftentimes break your prompts in ways that are, not really what you're. Essentially, I start using the image weight codes, chaos codes, stylized codes, all that stuff when I hit a wall. I don't start off with them because essentially what they're doing is either limiting or diversifying your data set in a way that is different than what's predictable. So maybe I'm wrong with that, but it is the way I look at it. So take a look at that. So the anatomy is all over the place. That is true. But the important thing is that we're getting a level of continuity that if I now come back up to here, because we know it works. Like we know it works. The background is consistent. The character is in the shot. It is mostly the same character with a lot of weird stuff going on in terms of the anatomy. But what we can do now is come back up to here, and this is really a command that really should be used only if you have a pro account. But we can now hit variation, subtle, paste all of our URLs, but this time I am going to do the repeat command. And we are going to repeat this, let's just say 5 times, because I really appreciate getting access to turbo mode for a stage, but I'm also not going to just like insanely abuse it, so we can see the results here. But let's hit yes. The biggest negative with using repeat is the fact that you have to manually remove the repeat if you're going to do variations again, because otherwise it's going to repeat 5 prompts every time you hit a button. Let's just see what kind of results we got out of here while that's all going, and make sure that I did hit variation subtle, because it looks like I'm not getting the same results, which is a little upsetting. Let's see if I come back up to here and see what I did. So I'm curious if we are able to. Okay, yes. So we definitely have the backgrounds are now lost. I don't know why that is. It shouldn't be. We ran it under the same thing. It should give us similar results to this, but instead we are again getting very usable, like for the most part usable shots down here. of, again, the character is consistent, it's continuous, it's in front of a restaurant, it's moving around. Even though I didn't get the same background like we can use for animations and stuff, we did get a lot of very usable put. I mean, I'm leaving the character reference here, the standing pose here, to really show you guys just the level of continuity that we're getting from multiple prompts. And again, that pose is largely repeated through all these. I will say that it's been a little bit of a challenge to keep the tutorial up to date, because there's all sorts of like changes that happen on Midjourney's backend that like I try to keep up with, but I'm only one person, right? So it's a little tough to do. So yeah, we're definitely getting very usable, but again, different backgrounds. The character is completely continuous, but I think for the sake of what I'm trying to show here, of trying to show continuous characters, this is fine. To do the mid-journey like animation stuff that I did for the start of the tutorial with Micah, to do all these kind of animations will require to essentially crop and paste and have experience with Adobe products, particularly Photoshop and After Effects. The tutorial itself gets into all that stuff, but I really am not planning on doing anything like that today. Um, this is just to show you guys that we're able to get repetitive, continuous characters. Sweet. Repeat should be removed from secondary jobs. If it doesn't, it should soon. Okay. Yeah. It's the thing is that it's at least from my experience, the reroll button is the thing that's most broken for me right now in terms of trying to use it with this workflow. It's just it used to just redo the exact same thing I asked it for before, and I'm not getting that. Well, I definitely don't really want to work with image weights right now, just because the Niji doesn't have image weights. So if we were doing specifically anime style, we wouldn't get image weights with that. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do repeat 40 on Turbo, man. Like that's just me abusing my new powers here. I'm good on that. I'm gonna play a song for you guys. That is that is gonna let me have a little bit of time to review the black box here, and I hope you guys enjoy it. It is something that it's a classic from my childhood here, and this will just give me a little bit of time to dig into stuff here. So enjoy. All right. How's it going, y'all? Yeah, so that was one of my favorite songs of the day right now. It's also true that, by the way, yeah, thank you for the shade. Like I had to do this gag. I mean, it's like, but the teacher wears cool shades. Yeah, if I'm gonna be the teacher today, I'm gonna lean into this stuff. But I'll say this. I saw someone mention uh, about making VTuber models with Midjourney. This is a Midjourney model that I turned into a VTuber with Adobe Character Animator, and I might do a class on that too. But here's the thing. Uh, yeah, it's probably like the least experienced program that I have, so I really do need time to kind of figure out how the ins and outs of that work. This is kind of my hack job of a model. So uh the way that a lot of this like VTuber stuff works is essentially like the backbone of traditional animation, but it's being tied to a webcam, right? So it's pretty. If you've done anything with Adobe like Flash Animator and stuff, then you're probably already a head start of everyone else when it comes to making this kind of stuff. Um, but I want to make a note here real quick. I realized something with this music video, which is that uh, the two characters that are shown here, this blonde girl with the sunglasses and the male character here with the sunglasses here, yeah, this one here. It's essentially me and my wife, honestly. Like I have an RV that I drive around the country and whatnot, and like it's that's literally us. So that's fun. Uh, Honestly, I spent 3 hours fiddling with audio tools just for that sunglasses gag. Uh, it took way too long to pipe my audio correctly through Discord, so that's fun. The results that we got from folks, though, I'm so happy to see 16 responses of different image references from you all. That's so cool to see. We have Everett World with this one here. I picked this one because it's a live action model. I think we'll be able to do some pretty cool stuff with with this character here. There's multiple belts. The belts do change on this, which is fine. We can either correct that manually, or we can just allow that level of continuity shift between these. But for now, I'm always tempted to fix double belts though, because it looks like, that you're like a kid who's trying too hard in the like late 90s, So the other model here is from Dragon 2, I believe. I have to check up some of these names here, but um, this is particularly fun because it has a non-humanoid element to it, but is still a humanoid figure. So I believe we can get pretty reliable results out of this. Um, and let's see here. Then and then we also have from Captain Main here a Pixar-like 3D model. And this one I'm very excited to show you guys because from the Toy Story prompts I've done in the past and whatnot, we could make this style look so good now. So we'll get into that. And then lastly, I'm sorry, I don't know who submitted this one. I have to look deeper into the sheet. But this one is a very stylized, fun female character that we can mess with here. Yeah, I'm curious to see how well the dragon tail comes out in the next prompt too, for sure. Um, so the what this prompt though actually reminds me of is something from my character turnarounds or original character sheets here. So inside of my Discord here, I actually have a group of kids, mostly kids, honestly, who are experimenting with this workflow. And one of the prompts that we had come up with here was actually kind of what happens when I ask Midjourney to look at my hand drawn art. Like, what does it think my hand drawn art is? And it said the word that kept repeating was rat punk. Probably because I am a big sketchy fan of like Jonan Vasquez cartoons and stuff like that. It just I do really quick black ink sketch work here. So when I did that, the rat punk prompt is very similar to this one that I'm noticing. So I love the whole rat punk aesthetic that comes out with this. You get so many details, so many things that can be made continuous that I'm excited to show the results of these semi non-humanoid characters, these I guess furries. Yeah, I'm going to avoid furries for the time being, just for the sake of because anatomy wonkiness tends to exaggerate a lot when we start to bring in non-humanoid form. But tails we can probably get away with. I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily pick and choose between these and start messing with them. Let's go ahead and start to make some character turnarounds for these here. We have some idea of where we can take this in terms of the different kind of action prompts we want to do with this. But I personally, I think we should just start with this one just because it's going to give us a very different style from everything that I've been doing up until this point. So I'm going to go ahead and download that. We get a Catboy VTuber tutorial next time. Yeah. Like, I feel like there's kind of a big overlap here with people who want to see, different VTubers and stuff get made here and whatnot. Because any one of these characters could actually turn into a VTuber if you just make it, have an alpha channel around the character and then assign the bones correctly. But what we're gonna do in Photoshop though is we're essentially just going to isolate. Again, you could do this with MS Paint. You could do this with any image manipulator. But the idea here is that we are going to start to isolate these. And I do want to remove the background on these just because these darker tones that are back here may force the environment to always be darker. It might do some wonky stuff that we don't actually want it to do. So let's see here. Oh, I remember when V5 launched, and I think it was AC that mentioned something about cat boys and stuff, and like I remember, like I forgot what you said there, man, but it was really funny to me. It was just like, oh, we made sure that the cat boys work in version 5. Don't worry about it. Uh, so I do appreciate that note. But the only thing
It's
I'm
my
gonna do here,
default testing prompt.
it's a
So
default
I've
testing. There you go.
tested every iteration while we were testing it, and they worked.
That's good. That's good. I'm really glad to hear that that's the criteria you all got. It actually made me feel like I was like, oh, these are my people. You know what I mean? Like I was like, it's the last thing that I get from y'all during the office hours is like corporate stuck upness. Like there's none of that. You guys are very straightforward and honest. And I really appreciate that. It's also very refreshing from like, the standard business operations of stuff, especially like in entertainment, you'd be surprised how stuffy things get. It's like only the actors and animators that are the folks coming in wife beaters and hanging out, like, but what I'm doing here is I've made an extremely rough crop of this. My only real intent out of this is to make it so that I don't see that background influencing these images. And now I can come into here and essentially just select move to make it easier for me to copy and paste these later. But because we have a negative space, and this is something that's true of like any photo manipulator, if you rely on your clipboard for taking things into Discord, it's no longer going to preserve the alpha channel. It will do this. I'll jump over the Discord so you can see it. You could see here that it created the white border around it. It's essentially going to ignore the alpha channel entirely. And I'm not really too sure how Midjourney respects alpha channels inside of its image references, but I personally don't really see much of a difference between whether or not there's a white background or whether there's no background. Maybe I'm wrong on that one, but what we can do though is we are going to create image references out of these. I am so tempted to just highlight that second belt and hit generate fix, but I don't want to focus on Photoshop generative stuff inside of a Midjourney tutorial. I'll hold back the temptation there. But what I'm gonna do is come back into the room I've been generating in. Okay, and now I'm just going to start selecting these three poses, and I'll need to actually cut back in and see what this person responded with in the black box to see what sort of stuff they want to see this character doing. But for the time being, we have the three URLs. Let's try to make them full bodies at this point and see what we can do. So I am going to hit imagine, and then we're just going to describe this character really quick. So let's just say that it's a redhead, um, her. Again, I prefer using pronouns rather than saying things like female or anything like that because it oftentimes boxes the result too much. I prefer just doing a very empty open-ended gender and let that kind of take over. And I guess that's a crop top or something. That's not a crop top. I don't know what kind of jacket or vest that is, but um, let's just do a skirt or a green skirt. And even though this is baked into the image information already, I know that it might see that as pants. It might see that and add length to it and stuff. So we want to say that it's a skirt of some sort. Um, and then um, and then we'll just let's do also long hair. So we do long hair, redhead, and we'll let that be our starting prompt here for this. The main thing that I kind of want to emphasize here is that we're not trying to make anime, right? So we don't want to use Niji. We don't want to rely on that. But you can see that just by doing the word only prompt, we don't get the character, but instead we are going to get the silhouette or the shape that we're looking for here. And there anything with like a bare shoulder like this is probably not going to image inject as well because we're trying to put a jacket on her and stuff. So something like this or something like this, the first two are probably better results for what we want. But well, the thing is I forgot to put full body in there. So let me go ahead and add full body on there. And that way, I like so I will say this now. I make a lot of mistakes. In fact, that's kind of my entire shtick is that I lean into my mistakes a lot and try to create full stories out of those. But you can see that we're getting a lot of bare shoulders again and stuff. Some real pretty stuff, I do admit, but like I'm still worried that the silhouette's not going to come out. It's going to add random spaghetti string tops and stuff like that. So let's now add a change in here, and say jacket or something like that. Let's do green jacket. Just it may sound redundant to like add color and then outfit and then add color and then other outfit, but this is what I do in order to make Victor continuous as well. I'll say black shirt, black pants, or black shirt, black hair, to just kind of emphasize that each one of these like commas and whatnot. Oh, look at that, we are way closer on this one here. But it's okay that we didn't get a full body yet because we have some new tools that lets us get the full body, which is the new pan tools here. Because guess what? We can actually remix inject into anything we pan as well. It's just going to be really cool, and I can't wait to show you guys the how I'm basically able, or at least how I expect us to be able to do things like prompt battling in the future. Where right now, the way that prompt battles works for that I've seen anyway, it's just kind of like a challenge, right? Like, hey, everyone try to make this image, and we'll judge who's the best one, I guess. I want to see it to where it's actual physical combat. I want people punching each other. I want people like, serving each other crumpets just because like that also scores points. Like I want really random interactions between two separate characters. That may sound impossible right now, but it's totally possible with this workflow. So you can see here that we have a lot closer to what we're looking for, though. So let's go ahead and let's compare the original here real quick. Um, I would say I would probably say that for the sake of making sure that the legs and the skirts accurately like length and stuff, we're gonna go with the fourth one here. Again, don't get married to these. Don't be upset that they don't look how you want them to look right now because we haven't done any image injection yet. We haven't told it that we want anything more than the posing and the kind of silhouette again that we're looking for. So now I'm going to come back into here and I'm going to grab the 3 URLs from here like this. And then we can, you'll notice here though, that there is no variation buttons anymore because we panned. The easiest solution for this is simply to hit make square. Essentially what happens here is it gives us our variation buttons back. It really doesn't matter which one we pick because the make square did so little to the image, right? It just added a little bit on the left and right. So I'm just going to pick the third one. And now we will grab our URLs and hit variation subtle. So I'm going to start off with the front pose because it matches the closest to our reference to the image that we've generated, and then we'll add the others to kind of act as a they have less weight. We saw that when we did the shortened prompt. We saw that the images had less weight, so we can immediately infer that we can order the images based on which details we think are the most important. That would be the first image for sure. So now that I have these 3 URLs in front of the prompt that we're doing a variation subtle on, I can hit submit. And I'm going to just copy that URL again, like so, those 3 URLs, and we'll also do a strong just to kind of see what it does. And I'm going to leave up the reference here so that we can really see this and compare it and take a look at some of that. So we have the belt now. We have some of the some of the facial features are preserved. I think that one's probably super close. Like it's basically pick which one you think is the most in line with what your character's like mood or aesthetic is. Now, the farther away we move from the camera, the less likely we actually get continuity here. But if we did now variation strong, and I'll switch over to the zoom focus so we can look at this more closely. Turn myself off here. If we look at that closely here, look at that. Like it did a great job replicating every aspect of this character with variation strong. I can just pan down to effectively make the full bodies now from these different poses. But you'll notice that they all kind of look like, like photo shoot. And that's the importance of using action prompts later. And this mostly comes because these photos kind of look like they're from a photo shoot. She has beauty halos on. That's something that you see from blowing out from using big china balls and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the This is essentially the live action version, or like mostly live action version of the workflow, and we can go from here and add more, action and continuity to that. And I think what I'm gonna do, just to make this a bit easier, y'all, I am going to, make these turnarounds of these 3 or 4 characters that we've pulled out of the black box, and then I'll come back around and read your all's responses during another song, so that I can then give direction to one of them, and we can start to build a comic out of one of these characters here. Before I jump into that, I do want to show really quick on my website here that I have done full live action. You've seen only anime, you've seen a little bit of like painterly styles and stuff, but live action is another beast entirely. If you guys decide that you want to mess around with live action, just know that it's going to be tricky, but the results that come out of it are ridiculous. So there was a Midjourney user named Jarts who made what I call a concept film or a concept storyboard for a thing called Chrome Lords. It was literally just a big goofy 80s schlocky action thing. And yeah, I really want to check out all those turnarounds, man. I cannot wait to dig into that. If we if we go ahead and kind of pull up this panel here, this is Chet McDowell. Um, Eventually, I was going to do the joke of, that he gets assimilated and becomes Chet GPT, right? That was my joke for this whole thing. But the whole idea here was I created a live action 80s trailer with Midjourney. And the idea here was that because I can make continuous live action characters, he is essentially an AI actor. It is someone that I can direct and manipulate into the scene and have him do whatever I want him to do. So I basically told him at the beginning of this, I want you pointing the gun at the camera. I want you pointing the gun at someone else. And then to pull it back, all this is basically just comic assembly and layouts with Midjourney prompts. There's entire, like kind of story that's going on here. There's some jokes and stuff, but I really wanted to emphasize the fact that for the most part, you can recognize Chet as being this kind of Mel Gibson slash, like he's very Gibson. I get that, but he's a combination of many different '80s actors, all not by intention, just by prompting. There's actually an entire animated sequence for this short here, and the reason I wanted to bring that up was just because when we start to get into, like how far you can push this tech, or at least push this workflow, as soon as you get into live action, you're going to recognize that like color correction becomes a major factor. You got to make the skin tones all match. You got to make a lot of different things match that I feel like we'll get there eventually with like anchors and stuff, but right now it's very manual. So I'm warning you that if you're going to do character creation, live action makes some really cool stuff. But if you want to go any farther than comics or storyboards, you're going to have to learn some After Effects. That's for sure. Anyway, what we can do is we can move on to the next character here. And again, I'm going to double back to this character again at some point, probably, to kind of create a comic with this character. So I'll go ahead and get rid of all that, and let's move on to the Pixar-like character. I really like this character. So let's go ahead and download this guy. Let's do the action poses for this character just right off the bat. Because it's a child, and maybe, you know what? Actually, this would be a great example of using Describe, because I think that we really want to hone in certain aspects of this. So now that I have slash describe here, I can come in and actually drag the result we have here. There you go. I'm just going to run slash describe so we can see what sort of results we get out of this. All right, so yeah, young black boy with afro. It's. I mean, that's something. Johnny boy from an animated movie. That's interesting. In the style of my camp, like I try to avoid the proper names. I'll be honest, and maybe that's just me being irked out by some of that stuff. But like it is true that whenever I'm prompting stuff, I purposely try to use generic terms. If I wanted to pay homage or parody somebody, I go into this a little bit with the tutorial, but if I want to pay homage or have fair use of something, right? then yeah, prompt whatever. But um, if you do not want to be seen as like directly copying or plagiarizing, even, then I would recommend not using specific art styles of people, particularly. Like I tried to avoid Miyazaki. I tried to avoid any concept artist in terms of their name, all that kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with you just doing it as a person and stuff, but like it is just a personal line that I draw for myself. So let's go ahead and take some of these key phrases here and start to build them into an action scene. So let's do a young black boy with an afro, and then let's do playing hopscotch or something, and then we'll add a larger playing hopscotch, tripping, falling, just so that we can give it like a little bit of direction and action here. And then I'm going to hit character sheet, multiple poses, and we're going to see if we get anything usable out of that. Now, I didn't indicate anything about art style on this, so this could be very, very wild in terms of the results. But we could also just magically end up with a Pixar-like character. And we have a little bit of 3D form here, but the thing is about these results is that, and we get some really cool like random poses and stuff. Definitely hopping and skipping. Like we can learn those prompts work, but we're not getting the 3D form, right? So let's break my little rule here, and let's write Pixar in there, and so it's Pixar art style, and I'm going to put that in front of the child here, just so that we can put a little bit of emphasis that I really want this to look like 3D. I really want this to look rendered. Look at that. Yeah, that's pretty darn good, especially like the first and the fourth one here. I'm definitely seeing some 3D, not entirely. There's a lot of 2D elements in this. But what we can do though is now that we have this image here, we have to break these out into two different URLs. If I do this straight, just with the reference sheet, like this, if I just do this, I'll do it for example, but the thing is that if I just do this, it's going to reference, it's going to try to forcibly put two people. Yeah, it'll basically change the posing pretty dramatically. But you know, we do get closer, but look at this, look at the age differences, look at the variation in heights and all that stuff that we get out of that. And that's entirely, at least in my opinion, like we got nice 3D form there, like we got some pretty cool stuff that works. But the the at least in my opinion, when you try to reference multiple characters in one URL, it tends to look way too much like the original URL that you sent it. So like look how the character is here and standing next to another one. It's the same thing here. They're both standing next to each other. It's both about the same silhouette. That's not what we want. So what we're going to do is just grab that image here, right click and copy, and then hop on over to Photoshop or any image manipulator you are using. So let's do this one here. If we end up using this background, this sort of subtle haze here, it'll kind of always look like they're in kind of a white room, right? At least not a white room, but like the space will be this void. If we don't at least remove this gradient that's all the way around the character here. So I'm just using in Photoshop here the magic wand tool to quickly grab this, you know, everything that isn't the character here. And I know that there's better tools here, but I'm purposely avoiding them because like the more advanced AI tools is not really what I want to use this platform to advertise right now. I just want to show you generic tools that might be common in other image interrogation program or image manipulated programs. So we'll just kind of come into here, and I could have just increased the, you know, the sensitivity on this tool, but I really don't want to have too many hard jagged edges. So I think we'll be good with that. Let's take a look. Yeah, that's pretty good. A little bit of muckiness down here. Just gonna clean that up manually. There you go. So now that we have this here, there's a lot of like halo issues around the hair. I'm just not gonna worry about that right now. But I'm gonna go ahead and select as close to the character as I can. Come up to here, copy, bring that into Discord. Like so, do the same thing. So let's go ahead and send these two image references. Again, the only reason that I'm posting them to Discord is because it very quickly gets me a URL that I can copy. So now we'll come into here, we'll copy these, come back over to the one that we liked. So we'll do this one here. And why not? We'll do that one as well. Um, let's do this one because it kind of reminds me more of skipping and movement. There's a lot more movement in this, which is great. We'll go ahead and hit variation subtle, paste that here, grab the next URL. The the one thing I probably should mention too here is that you really want to make sure that your URLs are spaced out properly. You want to make sure that there's a space, and then you paste the next link, and then there's a space again, in order to make sure that your words and your URLs don't get convoluted and they don't break. Neat. Okay. So we definitely have more continuity in the character's hair and whatnot. But let me actually just open this up here so you guys can see it more easily. Um, we definitely have more continuity in the hair, but we've lost the outfit, the hoodie in particular. So that means that what we need to do is we need to double back to our character sheet, the word only character sheet. So we haven't done any injection yet. And we want to come into here, hit slash imagine, and then we're going to add that outfit. So we're going to say a dark hoodie. Really, probably shouldn't have it in front of the character descriptor, but we'll go on from that. But I know that we're past hour 2 now, y'all. Thank you so much for sticking around and checking out what silliness I've been getting into and whatnot. Um, it's definitely appreciated. So we still have a jacket, we still have a vest and stuff that's on the character here. This one's so close. It literally is so close, but we still have a vest or a jacket on there. We might just try injecting into there, but I really don't want that jacket. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to do a negative weight for um, jackets. So no jacket, and see if we can maybe get around this issue here. Yeah, it basically removed the entire hoodie too, but at least we don't get a silhouette that otherwise breaks because of the jacket kind of splaying out to the sides. So I really like this first one, and I also like this third one. They're not really Pixar style necessarily, but I think that they evoke the mood that we're looking for. We have our two URLs, and then we're going to do variation subtle, and then variation strong, and we'll see if we're able to essentially force that hoodie to be more visible. And yeah, I mean it's definitely not a hoodie. It's still a shirt, but at least the colors are starting to get in line with it. There's a little bit of length to it. But here we go. All right. So I think we're really close with this one here. It may not have all the poses that we want, but at least it gives us some variation in character here. So let's just to compare. Let's open up the originals here. Um, where is it? There we go. I'll turn myself off so you guys can see. We just got to pick the one that matches the closest at this point. I think the first one is pretty close. It's just a little too tall. Um, the there's a lot of potential out of a couple of these here. The hoodies are just all not dark enough, honestly, but that might be just because of the initial images that it's generating here. So I'm just gonna upres the first one. And again, the only thing that we would do at this point is come into our image manipulator here, make the canvas bigger, and we start to add these poses to the sheet. So that we can essentially start to create the poses that we would then reference. Like I wouldn't really use the first image very much because it doesn't match a lot. There's not like we could come into here and manually correct all this stuff, right? Just by selecting. Now I'll just quickly use one of the quick select tools. We can come into here, select this, and then match the colors, right? In order to rebuild our character sheet manually. But I wanted to get as far as possible with just our image references here. So now I'm actually going to ignore the main image. That may sound weird right now, but I'm going to just ignore this one. And I'm going to keep these poses because the poses actually tell Midjourney a lot, even though they're real tiny right now. they do tell what sort of action or movement we want to preserve inside of this character. So they may not be perfect or accurate or otherwise useful, but what it does, however, is give us a momentum to start with, and we can kind of figure out who this character is just based on prompting alone. And again, we're doing all this stuff without any anticipation of, or without a script. I mean, we don't really know what these characters are until I read more into the black box. But for now, anyway, I can start to organize this character sheet with a lot of available poses. And if I think that, oh, this is not enough poses, I want a couple more things, I could always come back into here, hit switch variation strong, and then just start giving it direction. So let's do falling over, tripping, and yeah, just falling over and tripping. Let's just do those two by themselves, and we're doing that in front of the URLs. That's a pretty important element of all this, is that the order of your prompts does matter. It will help you be able to determine, um, the, like, look at this. We're getting some really good continuity out of this one, y'all. I'll open this up in the browser here. Look at that. We have a kid, moving around. He's got some confidence about him, so it's kind of harder to evoke him, like, going whoa and falling over. But we definitely have the same character in a space here. But now let's try to do something fun here. So let's go ahead and use. We know this works. We know that we're able to make workable things with just these two images here. So let's do like a dodgeball fight with this character, and we'll do blending for this, just to get us to our goal here a little quicker. So I'm going to copy everything that we know that works. I'm going to make a whole new prompt. So this is much more of what I was kind of looking for here. We have immediate Pixar art style combined with a character that kind of looks like it, right? Especially the top right one here. And we have the hopscotch. We have other elements of what had asked for, much closer than the random divergence that I got earlier. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our two URLs. And again, we don't have all the action poses saved out. These are just the two URLs. We can now go ahead and inject that into there and see how close it gets. We might need to start using some of our references that we built. But the main thing I want to show you guys now is how to combine two characters together. So you can see that the results are immediately leaning back into the direction, because the default for variation is actually variation strong now. So I think it is anyway. We should be able to now upres that one and do this again, but this time with variation subtle. The fact that those two buttons are kind of hidden underneath the upres is a little confusing for me to write out in the tutorial. So just being able to visualize it here, I think, helps. But look at that. Variation subtle is how we essentially retain the continuity of these characters. We could always draw the hoodies back in. We could always do stuff manually to fix this up. I personally love, sharing what the stuff that I've done and all that stuff, but also I also understand that it can kind of fall under like spam and stuff. Like I try my best to avoid over notifying people and things like that, but it does come down to the fact that it's a very murky time for content creators. They don't really know whether or not that they're going to be falling under self promotion rules, or, I mean, I literally had one of the mods tell me, um like, we just can't tell if you're selling NFTs or not. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, 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 no,
No,
I don't.
you did the right. I think you did the right thing. Like, you came in and you were talking like a person, and that was extremely cool, because you were in a room full of people that were looking for that kind of information, and I was like, I think there's going to be more people looking for that kind of information.
Yeah, character continuity is kind of like a big demand for Midjourney, and I know
Yeah.
that based on the office hours chats that I did hop into, that the continuity is the most requested thing. And when it comes to storytellers, like, they really really need that in order to be able to, to tell a story of beginning to end and not have it be immediately disregarded by the general public, because now AI imagery is at least it's known what it looks
Mhm.
like, at least what it looks like badly, like when you just generate the first thing you see and then post that online.
You can
Um,
tell.
I'm actually glad that the public has become aware of this stuff. So many of my early comics were airing frustration at people complaining about hands. We've been making character turnarounds. We've been injecting those characters into prompts and stuff and showing that you can retain some level of continuity, and there's always going to be some amount of manual fixing that has to happen. But let me show you what it looks like when everything goes right, in terms of the first results that we get and stuff. So one of my most popular comics that has come out recently is my Picasso comic. Um, this comic here, feel free to take a second to read it and stuff. But essentially, this comic here blew up on Reddit and is like at 8,000 upvotes or something. And this is a rare example of an AI comic doing very well in an artist space. And the reason why this comic did so well is because I am directly addressing AI imagery and using AI imagery to do so. That's what gets me my social license to use it and share it publicly. And in some of those like creative folks minds, like I'm even okay of putting my
Meta.
signature on the bottom. Yeah, there's a
It's
meta
very
to it. And
meta.
then yeah, and you do have to be aware of that like if you don't use it with intent and you're just using it to generate something, rather than draw it, then you might get hassled for that. You know what I mean? And I instead approach it of leaning into my comics talk about AI directly, and therefore that gives me license to use it. So the thing about this is that the breakdown for this is pretty straightforward in terms of once you've seen this workflow, you get what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in here so you guys can take a better look at this. I have to manually stretch it up here. So the original prompts that I started with on this was a generic critiquing art at a gallery show, webcomic, her, blonde, AR21. This is just to set the aspect ratio to something wide. And you'll notice that the very first image that I chose doesn't look anything like my final image, but that's okay because the only thing I really liked about it was the perspective of she's in front, there's people in the back. That's what I wanted to do. Was thinking like maybe Picasso's back there somewhere and she's up front here. That's great. That's what I want. I do not want two characters side by side talking to each other because that's not what's happening in my joke, right? So the thing is that I first thing I did was I set up res on this, and then I did a variation subtle with Sage's art, and Sage's art is down here. I'll go ahead and highlight that as well really quick. Let me scroll back up to here. I know it's a bit awkward with this big image I'm moving around, but I have Sage's character art here. This is her character sheet. This is actually my wife's self insert. Um, she whenever you see, this is the first time we actually did them prompt together like this. But the her self insert is like I purposely made her a bit grumpy, like a bit like frumpy in that way. And it's mostly because people really relate to a frustrated female character right now. I don't know. It just works really well publicly. And so Sage is my most popular character easily. And this is all that she is. It's just like 10 URLs or so. And let me hide her really quick. And so I inject her into that first prompt. Yeah, here. I inject her into that first prompt. I got these results out of it, which is a little tough to see, but I'll zoom in a little more. Um, I got these results out of it. I wasn't really too happy with them, but I knew that I saw the back of her head and the front of her head, or 3/4 of her head. So I said variation subtle. And now I got one that was super close that I liked. And that was it. That was the final image here. After upresing it, I hit square. That gave me my final panels and a little bit of her elbow here. And then I drew a single line because it was missing on the top of her head. That's all I drew in the entire comic was that single line in her hair. Um, and then we can now hop over to Victor, who is a separate prompt. Um, Again, I didn't actually start with a word only prompt. Like unlike Sage here, which is just words, and then I inject the art into it afterward. With Victor, I started with the art and then wrote minimalist webcomic character, black hair, don't look behind you, but. And you notice I gave direction for what Victor is supposed to do. Don't look behind you, but that's referencing his action right here. He's telling her, "Don't look behind you," but that literary phrase is something that it could reference on from not just movies, film, and entertainment, but most importantly, literature, novels. I give the direction of my characters. I tend to do it at the end of the prompt, just so that I can like evoke a little bit of movement, a little bit of direction. And you'll notice that none of these really have the nudging, the shoulder nudge of saying, "Hey, hey, look behind you," kind of thing. None of that's shown, but it is baked into my prompt. So that means that when I pan down and I add animated hand gesture, contorted body form, boom, I got it. I got the hey, 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 you're supposed to like you shouldn't be saying that out loud kind of stuff. And then here are the rejected prompts. And they're just overly complex, or they otherwise have a too cartoony of a style for what I was going for. I just took a very generic gallery portrait frame and then I threw Picasso's picture in it. Um, I will say, for the sake of this joke too, I had to censor it, right? Because it's a nude woman on a red chair. So I leaned Sage's body, like from the prompt. It's in the prompt, but I positioned Sage's body to also act as a sensor for the painting, which is upsetting for me. I hate the fact that I have to censor basically two circles, but like that's just the world we live in now. And then lastly, the very last prompt in this, which always kind of upsets people when they see this, is the Photoshop beta inpainting blurred text. I just highlighted that, said blurred text, and then it put that there. So I was like, perfect. So and oh yeah, and Picasso himself. This is actually something where I'm going to hop out of this really quick. There's a little trick, by the way. There's a little trick that not many folks know about with Discord. You can actually click just the upper part of the text here, and that will jump you back to your prompt that you had before. This is super useful when doing variations and stuff. Just click the text on the top there, and it will jump you to the previous prompt from that chain. In the future, I really hope there's a flow chart. I really want there to be a flow chart that I can like review. If the web app has that, awesome. I'm so stoked for that. But anyway, I wanted to show this one though because I was shocked at the quality of this prompt here. I'll mute myself here real quick. This may not be character continuity, but man, is it continuous to Picasso himself. Like that is such a great picture of him, and it's impossible. He died well before digital photography. There's no way that a picture would look like this that it was taken of him. So very cool to see that. But then what I did here to get the rest of the background for that comic was I just did a zoom out. This was the final one that I used. Same thing, basically the same thing. But look at that. Like they may not be anatomically correct, but that was my entire joke. Was that like a lot of people will give AI imagery a bunch of crud for being anatomically incorrect, but there's a lot of artistry that goes into expressing like motion and movement that is blurred, that can look like you have missing fingers or too many fingers because your hand's moving very fast in front of camera. Yeah, so it is something that I'm a lot less judgy of AI imagery for that, because I know that I can fix it, but also because like there's just so much expression that's going on that we can't see. All right, so that gets us at least to showing like kind of some end product stuff, some of the comics I've made, some of the workflow here. But to kind of like end this, see if you guys want to have me back on, I'll focus either specifically at comics. I'll do the VTuber one later because I need to actually practice messing around with stuff on that, particularly gesture control.
Pretty sure that we do want to have you back on. And I think there were a few people with questions in the chat. If you,
I would love to hear those questions if you wanted to give them. Yeah, please.
Well, I'm going to give you a comment first. Celeste has said, "This has been such a great session and I've learned so much. Huge thanks to Victor Gnarly for sharing his knowledge with us all." And Victor, this is from Corey Grimm. "I'd love to hear your thoughts on style driving content problem." Quote, "style driving content problem." Or have you not encountered it because mostly working on anime style?
So I'll say this. I do work with anime a lot, but I frankly the reason why I do it is not because of anime. It's because it's a drawn style. It is something that I can force it by saying minimalist webcomic character to look suddenly a lot more Western than anime necessarily. I personally, if you want to get me super excited, like geeking out excited, is if there's a style for Tex Avery. Like if we can have like Tex be like a style command, oh my god, like that would be amazing to get hand drawn styles that are not anime driven as a data set. That would be awesome. But in terms of style driving the content, I will say that I run into that when we're doing non-Niji stuff and we need to really reinforce what sort of style we're aiming for. The live action stuff is so laborious to do right now that I really don't want to do a ton of it. It's just because such little things can change. Even just like the amount of redness in your skin can show like, you know, um, even like what kind of where you're from and whatnot. Like Eastern Asian folks tend to get pink in the face when they drink alcohol because their bodies are more intolerant to it than Western folks. Like there's little things like that.
Can confirm.
Th-
I'm half Korean.
yeah, you don't hold your alcohol well. I'll just say this, like it's a stereotype. It's not meant to be like proof. It's not meant to be a justification or anything like that. It's just saying that there's so much visual information that we have to take into consideration, that or at least that the AI takes into consideration when we process this stuff, that we cannot possibly know all of it. Um, the
Absolutely.
reason why King of the Hill's Bible works the way that it does is because that's just failure. Tons and tons of failure of seeing animators try to draw Hank, but Hank looks way too agile, or he looks way too interested in what people are talking about. Like these are
I'll
things
just
that
tell you,
break his
I
character.
haven't seen King of the Hill, and I don't know anything about that show.
Yeah, I keep using King of the Hill because it's such a rigid show. It
I
there's
love
no
it.
reason for it to be animated, but it is, and it's beautiful for being animated.
You know that
Like
when I
you
moved
could
to
you could make a
Texas,
live action version of that, and it would still be funny.
when I moved to Texas, I found out that there was such an actual thing as a Luann platter, and it made my whole time there way better.
Nice, nice. Um, so I'm afraid to click this spoiler link from Ancient here on the stream. I'm gonna click
Oh
it.
Lord.
Comment about
Oh
Kinky's
Lord.
alcohol intolerance redacted. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Uh, yeah.
However, before we go on,
Yeah.
you
Let's.
guys
I want
want
to
to
hear
get
some more.
questions in?
Yeah. So like, I do notice there was a comment here about wanting to VTube as well. So I'll say this right now. It is a very very good way to essentially be able to identify with a much wider audience because anyone can imprint themselves the more minimalistic your character is. The more complex your character is, the more likely your audience is actually limited because of that. Um, for example, there's plenty of people that get upset when they see devil imagery. They just do not like to see that. They, for whatever reason, religious or otherwise, it doesn't matter. They just don't want to see a big angry dude with horns all the time, you know? And that limits your audience. So the more simple your character is, the more likely it's going to do better as a VTuber, in my opinion. Cutesy little like animals is just like a PNG. Like you can generate that right now and be able to use that as your little PNG tuber. You go on
You
Google and search PNG tuber, and that way you don't have to animate anything. It's just going to react to whenever you talk, and it's way easier to implement.
remember when a lot of people are using the iPhone reacting emojis that like did what your face was doing, and they
Yes,
use
yeah,
those? Yeah,
the
like
facial scanners, yeah. Yeah, it is kind of funny because we had access to these kind of webcam based animators, right? These kind of you know uh, asset animators and stuff, but like they were so rough when I was working. They were so like face clone was such a weird, badly implemented thing that they it only got working a couple years later. But I remember getting a demo disc and them going like, "Hey, you professionals want to try it?" And we were like, "This is a joke. Like there's no way we were gonna use this at all."
you ready for another question?
Oh yeah, give it to me.
I feel like I just kind of dominated that little area, but so here's a question for you. How important is aspect ratio when making the images that you're going to use for injections? That comes from Mahi.
It mattered a lot more before we had the zoom out functions. Now that we have zoom, it you can be happy with an image that's cropped and then uncrop it without painting, essentially. It was something that in my tutorial I emphasize a lot. That aspect ratio really dictates like the composition of your concept sheets. It dictates the amount of poses that end up on your concept sheets. So if you did like AR32, which is going to give you like a wide piece of paper effectively in terms of trying to like visualize it, it might give you a couple extra characters or a couple extra poses as opposed to doing a square prompt. I tend to use aspect ratio a lot more when I'm specifically trying to remake film or entertainment, like movies. I mean, an example of that actually is if I come over to our prompts here, and then I'm gonna search for DVD screen grab. So you could see here, like I did a DVD screen grab of Toy Story, and I just got Toy Story. Like there's nothing. That's freaking Toy Story right there.
It is Toy
But
Story.
yeah, but then I did a DVD screen grab of like Star Trek stuff, right? Like these were some guys trying to make an episode of the original series and stuff. But they were really trying to bring back that 70s look, right? So I was like, just keep prompting more like film grain and other things like that, and you'll eventually get something that kind of looks like a character that was bad, bad makeup and all that kind of stuff. DVD screen grab for the most part, I'll use for a lot of adventure stories. Like just being able to grab a still from what like is the composition that you would imagine on the back of a DVD box, right? Is kind of what sort of stuff comes out of this prompt. So aspect ratio matters a ton. So you can see here that because of the aspect ratio, I was able to get the elephant and him to not be center on the screen. It was because I asked for 16:9 or whatever. And if we did now a variation, like a variation strong of that upper right photo, we would probably get the elephants and him in different positions and stuff. It's really powerful what variation strong can do. Yes, aspect ratio does matter, but at a point, the zoom and pan functions can supplement any sort of like, oh, that picture would be perfect if it just had a little extra on the top sides or whatever. That's what the pan and zoom features are for me.
Awesome. So, what about style consistency? This is a question from Sai. Do you have any tips?
Style consistency. So there is something that I go through in the tutorial a little bit, but I have a video on my YouTube channel that goes into aesthetic plates. This space here is also obviously generated, but the thing about this is that this is actually the interior of my like fictional house that I have here. That is and now I'll pull myself back in here. The That's supposed to be the building over there, inside of there. And then I have my TV where I play games, particularly Pokemon Infinite Fusion right now. And then we can hop back and look at the screen. It's kind of like I'm moving through the space, you know. So that those little bits of world building I think help. But what I wanted to show here was that the aesthetic plates. So let me grab that from my files here. Uh, we were making a comic called Into the Woods, which is just a generic name that I pulled up out of, off the top of my head. And that was using this character sheet. So I'll just pull this up really quick. This is the character sheet that I used. It doesn't have a background, so you're going to have to kind of deal with some of the transparency. But this character sheet, we then generated action poses for. Okay, but I needed to make sure that the world was the same, so keeping the styles consistent. And so what I asked for was something along the lines of, Lost in the Woods or something like that. And the result that I got was beautiful. Like that's just awesome. I'll turn this one off here and then show you what one of these comics that use that same aesthetic plate looks like. So we have the original comic here, or the original panel here, and then you notice here, the world's continuous. Just because of that aesthetic plate, the character is still there. The world is mostly the same in terms of colors and vibe. Like it's overgrown, mossy. This is actually set in Portugal, by the way. One of my streamers was like, "I live in Portugal," and I was like, "I'm more than happy to throw Portugal into here. I could overrun Portugal." And yeah, so as we keep going, all of these frames, except for the speech bubbles, were made with panning over and including the word comic panels inside of the pans. My next stream will focus on storytelling. I feel like is probably the right route for me here. But I was able to make the cat moving forward and approaching. The hat is currently all the same. It's like the bottom because I need to generate different versions of her to be reacting to the cat approaching her. This evil cat. But look at that. I mean, just the fact that we're able to get mostly continuous and then the rest of it, there's no hand drawn paint overs done on any of this stuff. It's just it's just me highlighting, selecting, and deleting things that I don't want in order for the references. So I hope that answers your question anyway. The thing is that in order to retain this art style, to retain this, I needed to make an aesthetic plate. Because the reason why I didn't really bring this up earlier is because I am using Photoshop Beta a lot for this particular step. And yeah, here it's in the remix injections here. So I found it. So what I do is I highlight select around the character, and then I just did generative fill within Photoshop in order to in paint the character out of the scene entirely. You can see I click the button here for generative in painting, and then we're just going to see what this world looks like without the character in it at all. This is called an aesthetic plate. It's a term I made up. I don't know if it's the right phrase for it, but you could see the character is now completely missing, and we have 3 different options of how we want to fill that space in there. Photoshop Beta is amazing for this, but um, with this saved out like this, I now have an aesthetic plate that instead of injecting character art like the turnarounds, I can just inject this, and now the art style is going to return to look more like this.
Awesome. So Sika asks about your streaming config. And I hope this isn't too off topic, but here goes. When you click a generated image to open it in full screen mode on the right side of your streaming scene, are you middle clicking it, open a
Oh,
new tab, or how do you make that happen?
sure. Well, it'll focus on whichever. Here, let me turn myself here. It'll focus on whatever was the last browser that I was looking at, right? So sometimes I have to manually drag it over, but say for this one here, I can easily middle click it and open it up as a new tab. Essentially, when it comes to the streaming setup, there's a bunch of dedicated windows, and after I got it set up and I made sure with my buddies that everything worked, I just left my computer on until today.
I actually tried to do that about 2 hours before I did this with you,
Hmm.
and still had hiccups with my. That's why I had to switch computers.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean it takes a lot. You do need a decent rig in order to do this multi-layering kind of stuff because I have oh man, how many programs do I have open right now? It's at least 9. I have at least 9 different programs open at the same time. And it gets way worse when we get into After Effects because After Effects requires me to use so many different programs in conjunction with it that like um it's very easy for me to just do and then 404 everything's dead. Like my computer it needs to restart and everything's frozen. One of the reasons I don't do live rendering like footage rendering is because it's just so taxing on your computer.
Do you focus on a story idea first, or do you look for a visual spark to the story?
Visual Spark, actually. And the reason why is because one of the reasons that I didn't really excel in Hollywood, like personally, was because I'm not an actor. I have a pretty strong dyslexia and ADHD and other things that make me a bit spastic and unable to, um, you know, essentially read a script and sit down and like consume a story in the same way that other people do. A real script writer, like someone who actually knows how to write a good story and stuff like that, will be able to be very frustrated. Just going to be very frustrated at the beginning here because the reality is that if you lean into the randomness and you allow the Midjourney to act as like a co-writer for your story, a co-creator for what you're building, a partner even, you'll do a lot better. If you're going to treat them as a software program like Adobe, and stuff, you're gonna have nowhere near as much fun as you will if you're just kind of like, doing a creative spark kind of stuff. My my Picasso comic was actually inspired because Photoshop Beta gave my character Cyclops eyes, and the Cyclops eyes kind of look especially when it generated the rest of the mouth, it kind of looked like a Picasso painting. So I was like, look, it looks like a Picasso, and it was one of those things where I was just like, okay, I have to. I like this idea of accidentally mislabeling AI or his art as AI, because I know that that's a big frustration around with a lot of creative folks about getting accused of AI imagery when it's like clearly not. And now everyone who draws feels like they have to stream, like they have to like record themselves doing it just to prove that they're a real artist, And I do think that's a big shame. It's all social pressure that causes that, and I hate that.
We got Bob's Blazed. He asks, movie machine, Victor Gnarly, could we like hang out sometime? I have a ton of stuff I want to ask, and I have ideas on how you could possibly even improve your method. Way too much to even cover right now. And knowing Bob's Blazed, outside of his question, he's probably right. This could really, really, really get along.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always down to like, get input and change things around, particularly since this is simply my own perspective. The one problem with putting me on stage here is the fact that like I don't know whether or not what I'm doing is the best way to do it. It's just the way that works for me, you
I
know?
think it's great.
and and I'm gonna be honest. I don't think the mid journey guys really know either. You know what I mean? Like they're wanting to see what you all do with it because they're like, this is a big experimental thing that we don't really know what's the right way to use it. We just know the technical like functionality of it all. But in terms of how artists actually use this technology, more than consumers do, we don't know. We just simply do not know what people with especially with strong creative backgrounds can do with this stuff. And especially we don't know because of all the stigma stuff, like all the stuff related to um, creative folks not even able to feel like they can play around with it because they feel like they're doing something wrong. You know, I try to. That's the biggest tone I try to change. I take to heart the idea that there's going to be much better ways to do what I'm doing. I feel like that I just don't want to be seen as like this is the way to do it and every other way is like, wrong. That's not true at all. I think whatever way gets you to what you want to make is the right way to do it. Um, I just found a lot of success by using character turnarounds because that's how you would normally do it. If you're going to make a animated film, um, you have to start with the script or the character designs. The character designs can oftentimes direct the rest of like the entire story because you're an artist and you got inspired by something that is true to form, true to life, has meaning behind it. And everything that Midjourney is going to output has no real meaning or purpose behind it. You that all comes from you. The funny part about all that is the fact that everyone else can see it too, especially creative people. Images that exist with no real I'll summarize it like this. I very very strongly try to avoid the use the word art. I use the word imagery for nearly everything, and the reason why is because there's so much emotional attachment to the word art, especially from creative folks and consumers. They will not see that emotional connection. They'll just go like, yeah, you put a bunch of time into it. What's the big deal? Like it's about the 10,000 hours. You know what I mean? That is something that I don't take that lightly. So I try to avoid the use the word art.
For sure. Jaika asks, does the same type of technique work with props as well?
Oh yes, so that's actually a really good question because I didn't bring up props at all, and we also didn't get to the humanoid tail. I'm sorry, the little lizard tail girl. I'll do that on the next one. I'm feeling a little burnt from it, but I'll say this about props: your props need to be in your character reference turnarounds in order for it to be continuous. That doesn't mean that you can't get your character to hold a sword or you can't get them to drink a bottle or whatever, but if you want them always to be carrying a bottle, like they're the drunk, they're the town drunk, then you need to make sure that character sheet has the bottle in their hand. Or at the very least, or sorry, or as an alternative, have two separate character sheets. One of them with the bottle and the other one without the bottle. And then you just use whichever character sheet makes the most sense for that current moment or that current shot you're trying to make. For Victor, anyway, he has this character here. Victor has a total of 57 links. And those 57 links all vary from different applications. So like sometimes I need him to be very, very dark and moody. I need him to be very distant and stuff. So I have an entire character turnaround that's focused at making Victor more villainous and more dark. I have another character sheet that makes him more simple and makes him more of like a webcomic character. And that's for when I want to replicate more hand drawn, like quick sketch stuff. So on and so forth. I really, it really just comes down to like you get married to some of these character references and then you'll just keep going ham with it until you end up making a story. If I had the ability to write a great script, I would probably start with that. But it is something that I get inspired so heavily by the stuff I see. So
If you want to mix old art style with modern concept, for example, Rococo with sci-fi, what would your workflow be?
So I would definitely make an aesthetic plate that matches one of those art styles so that I can consistently re-inject that in, right? So like for example, let's take a movie like Blade Runner, right? Which is a juxtaposition film. It's a film that is set in the future, but everything that is shot like a film noir, which is a much obviously nowhere near sci-fi. The aesthetic plate that I would choose for that would be the film noir. It would not be the sci-fi because the vibe, the mood, the emotion that's behind it is film noir. It's not a sci-fi film. It may be set in a sci-fi setting, but it's a film noir. What is the unique juxtaposition here? Like oftentimes you can make very interesting characters just by subverting expectations. I mean, that's like the core aspect of comedy, right? Is that the punchline tends to be, either something that's so unexpected that it makes you laugh out of surprise, or it's so dry and so straightforward that you 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 just end up with like, oh, okay, yeah, that's funny because it's like, it's supposed to not be funny. Like there's an element of like meta humor to that. Turns out there's a meta for everything, and that includes filmmaking and everything else. It's just a matter of finding what that personal meta is.
So Eminem asked earlier, or just now, what you want to do when you make multiple characters in the exact same style. I mentioned to her that that was probably something for another class, but I do want to thank them for introducing me to you. So I had to throw that in there
Yeah,
because
yeah, for sure. The thing about what's really cool is that it's really easy to generate family members. It's really easy to generate friends. Well, at least similar looking friends, around the same age groups or maybe like same ethnicities or whatever. And the reason why that is because of the variation functions. Like you can basically say, all right, give me a female version of this character. Give me a Caucasian version of this character or whatever it ends up being. And you can start to lean the results towards different, character types, different character archetypes, even. Um, for me anyway, the pan features are insane for this because you can basically say hanging out with best friend as a prompt and it'll just be like, here's this random character's best friend, and you're like, okay, yeah, there you go, I got my second character now, neat. You could just be
now you have to base
extremely
everything
literal
off
with it.
him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you start the process in reverse. Like we can actually even do that here, where you say, hey, come all the way up here to like one of the originals here, and we can say, pan right and say like, remove all the image reference here and just be like, leave everything except playing hopscotch, maybe tripping and falling, maybe just leave those, and then say like, hanging out with best friend, her, just to force it so that it's a different kind of person. And
Just so you know, don't feel guilty about using the turbo. You haven't.
No, I recognize that I am an infinitesimal it just I'm a tiny little drop in the bucket of the millions and millions of people using this kind of stuff. But I just want to emphasize that I really do appreciate the opportunity and whatnot. This is a lot of fun to do, and I hope to do it more. But I do want to show here that we basically got this character's sister. Just by saying, "Hey, give me a pan to the left, add a different gender," and you know what I mean. Like it's just super cool to be able
It
to be
really
like,
is.
yeah, just let me pan over and make a new person, and then we just do this entire process again. But instead of using him, we use her. And now we have two character sheets, one for him and one for her. And you can make the comics like I did with Sage and Victor.
Steve
Yeah.
Barrett's asking, have you tried claymation style?
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so I do have to be very cautious here because I might accidentally dox myself in certain ways if I get too into this
Mm.
because I work stop motion, right? I was a stop motion visual effects artist. There's a lot of people who are familiar with some of the work that I've done in terms of the stop motion work. I When I first got into a certain technology, not AI, another one, um, I got hired to make little structures. I'm not even going to say what structures. I'm so nervous of saying what, but the I was making these little structures, and then I get a paycheck and it says it's from Google. They didn't even tell me that Google paid for the project. I was just like, they asked me for these little things, and I'm like, okay, yeah, here it is. And then they pay me like a small amount of money, and I'm like, it says Google on the damn check. There should be another zero on this. You know what I mean? It is funny that whenever we're doing anything with stop motion, it is so underappreciated right now. The amount of physical work. But in terms of prompting stop motion, and I won't really get into any of the political stuff or whatever, but I did do a couple of like stop motion versions of politicians and stuff that came out really well. I'm not going to share them here though.
Mm.
But claymation, particularly mixing claymation in one of my favorite prompts, abandoned doll, is a great way to make horror macabre because as my wife would say, every stop motion film is a horror film. I don't care if it's made for kids, I don't care whatever, but every stop motion animation, particularly claymation, is going to look like a horror film. What you can easily recontextualize it to be horror. Watch any Tool music video and you'll understand what I'm talking about. If we did claymation, let's do abandoned doll just because I love that prompt. And then let's just do Abraham Lincoln or something, just so we can pick up someone that's kind of recognizable here, and see what this kind of gives us. I did do like a couple of them that I'm like, oh wow, the AI image filter should have probably caught this one. Like, oh no, I'm not gonna dig into that one too much. But here is here's why I love Abandoned Doll particularly. I'm gonna mute myself here. Um, the fact that it made them so frumpy and so like there's so much mood in like
It's too soon for this particular political figure,
I'm
honestly.
sorry, what? Sorry?
I said I think it might be too soon for this particular political figure.
Yeah. It's too soon for an Abraham Lincoln joke. But I didn't prompt him in a theater. Okay, it's okay. If I go ahead, and turn myself here, the thing is that with the claymation prompts, I'm gonna upres this one here. We can essentially have a much you can either do custom zoom and obviously like get wider perspectives and stuff, but I want to be able to say like let's do claymation da 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 da, but let's do George Washington, and we can imagine like maybe there's a claymation story about the founding fathers or something like that. Kind of like Nightmare Before Christmas sort of vibe is what I'm getting. And this looks like the trees from the scene where he goes between Halloween and Christmas. Sorry for spoilers if you didn't freaking see that classic yet. But by doing pan over with remix mode, we deleted all the text except for abandoned doll and claymation. And yeah, I can. There's a couple of wonky things here, but it does work. So I can hit up res on this one, and then we'll come into here. It tried to give the hat, which is really weird. This would have been a scenario where I simply outpaint, or sorry, in paint that hat, that weird object out of his head or whatever. But it could also work to where if we just do like a make square and then do variations on it, we might get something better. But that's just so funny to me. Like just being able to pan and create new characters that are in the same style as what you're already working on, and then you just retroactively create those as new character sheets. So
So Sarah Valley, sorry, having fidelity in the characters in two separated scenes. How do you achieve fidelity in the same environment but in different angles? Like injecting environment but with different angles?
right. And that's with the word only prompt.
Inject background into it without losing the character.
So basically, you have two approaches for that now. Originally, you only had one, which was to start with a word only prompt, give a new kind of camera direction. Like for example, you switch the lens on the camera. Like you have to. It really just helped to have filmmaking experience in order to understand what all the different filmmaking terms are. But inside of my tutorial there is a filmmaking glossary that's just basically like a link to somebody else's list of popular film terms, from like over the shoulder to close up cowboy. Like all these phrases are very common film terms. But the if you want to really change the angle, the other option is to also do the variation strong button. So after you have everything that you're happy with, and you're like, if it was just this shot but a different angle of it, you can do variation strong, and then either write that new camera angle at the beginning of the prompt, or better, you can start off with the word only prompt with that new camera angle, and then re-inject your character art back into it. You may get maybe a slight moment before or after, as opposed to you're never going to get exact, but it in terms of the kind of results that I tend to get, variation strong gives me alternative shot angles while within the same lens or camera that I'm using. So if I want to change that, I have to physically write, I want a wide angle lens, I want a telephoto lens. Um, but the variation subtle is just meant to like preserve the depth map, to essentially be like, I like everything about this, but the details are wrong. That I need another attempt at this particular image. That's what variation subtle is for me. So variation strong gets you multiple camera angles, gets you multiple like dramatic changes, obviously. And then subtle is really just meant so that I can tweak the results and get what I want. So I hope that answers that.
One more from Corey.
All good, all good.
I'm gonna take a risk here and ask you about hints and workarounds. Anything about the
Mhm.
style driving content, because I have quite a big problem with it at the moment. Context: using MJ as a part of my master's thesis. Clarification for ancient: I want to mix old art style with sci-fi content.
Okay, okay. So I'll say this. Sci-fi can be easily prompted, as in like you can say, I want a spaceship. I want to be on Mars. You know what I mean? That's all sci-fi. And yeah, and as ancient saying here, you can always negative prompt certain things you don't like. Um, but the at least the big thing for me is that the aesthetic plate really lets you set what sort of colors and tones you're aiming for. So like if we did like an Art Deco spaceship design or something like that, we really want the aesthetic plate to be like the if say like you want the interiors to be an Art Deco style or vibe or whatever, then you want a reference sheet that's interior um, is Art Deco styled, and then you're going to manually remove all the characters from it so that you can have just the visual information that's there. Um, I really appreciate you watching, man. I definitely do. Thank you all so much. Creating an aesthetic plate. This is the aesthetic plate for my first short film. You notice how there's almost nothing there. It's not meant to evoke anything particular. It's meant to say, I want grainy black and white footage that is kind of broken, that's kind of been lost to time a little bit. So this just to give a little bit of backstory though, this short film was my very first thing that I made with this workflow before I realized I could make way more with it than just being able to consistently see an older version of my character here, telling his own kid something that my dad told me. So this I'll play the short film here, and then we'll probably call the stream it for today. The thing about this is that none of it was warp animated. Everything that you saw in this short film is essentially upresing the same prompts again and again and again and again until there are subtle variations in hair and movement, and then blending those all together to make things like this, where the hair is just kind of in the wind moving, the water shifts around. You notice how the water is moving in all these shots. The reason why that is because I understand what is meant to be random, and I'm utilizing randomness in my film or in animation as a visual effect. So it essentially, at this point, if you keep following my workflow, which thank you Kinky for linking it, the if you follow that, what essentially happens is you get to a point where with V4 anyway, we were able to upres and just keep getting more results. I hope we get to a point where we get something similar to this, but variation subtle for now. For version 5 we'll do this, but version 4 of Midjourney, whenever we upresed it, the results were always slightly different, and I took full advantage of that to animate this. So that's my little ending thing for you guys here today. But thank you so much for checking out my stream, and I'll be sure to cut it down and upload to YouTube for everyone else who couldn't make it today. Thank you all so much, especially those that stuck around for the whole thing. That's crazy. It's freaking 4 hours of just me yammering on. So thank you so much. I what I want to do is to keep doing this. Honestly, I think this would be a lot of fun to deep dive more into, but also for me to learn and improve things too. So if you do catch me on Twitch and stuff like that, it's twitch.com/Victor Gnarly. And I'll be streaming video games and things on there too, but I try to mix generative tech into it all the time. So like, I make little Pokemon and stuff like that based on the different generative fusions we make. There's a lot of really fun things we can do outside of Midjourney too. So all right guys, thank you so much. I'm gonna get some food in me. So you'll have a good night.